Hi, my name is Dan Tauby, and I am the Interim Chief Information Security Officer at Illinois State University. The following is a recording of a live webinar I delivered on October 27th, 2020 for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I hope that you enjoy it. The first thing I want to do is just recap the month and the topics we've covered as key points to highlight for whoever's in participation today. I know we have IT people, I know we have regular users and students. We may have some community members. So the topics here is going to cover a higher level than maybe the detailed. So if you're an expert, just follow along near the end. I have something that might interest you. So first off, week one, which happened to be October 5th through 9th, we covered a sense of staying safe online. Certainly an important topic these days, as many of us just rely on the internet and remote learning, remote work. There's critical recommendations that we shared on how can you stay safe in your day-to-day given our connectedness and reliance on technology. So the key points to highlight on that week were verifying links and senders. So later on, I have a visual that kind of highlights how you can do the link verification as well as sender verification. Installing updates on your computer, on your phone, for apps, for software. You want to stay up to date, and I'll revisit why that's so critically important in a later topic. And then engaging abuse at illstu.edu. So this is our email address that should you get suspicious messages or you even, you're not quite sure, it looks legitimate, but you're not quite sure, you can email, just forward that message to abuse@illstu.edu, and the Information Security Office will review and assess and respond in many cases. This is also how we'll post phishing alerts on our Tech Alert website. It's by users reporting it to us. Week two covered password practices. Just quick few points here. Avoiding password reuse. Trying to use passphrases. So this is where instead of doing a really complex character and alphanumeric kind of password, you have a series of words instead that overall the length is increased. And maybe it's easier to remember, but it's actually more secure and safe against compromise. We also recommend considering password apps or password managers, because as you reuse or avoid reuse and use passphrases, it can still be difficult to remember what they are. In the third week, last week, we focused on data itself and being diligent with data. So, topics such as sharing securely using services like OneDrive that we have with our Office 365 service, or even Send-To, which is a service we run out of Technology Solutions to send files without using email, because email can be often insecure depending on what you need to send. We also touched on identity theft in particular, because when data is breached or lost, it often will lead to identity theft. I have a topic I want to cover in this brief webinar that raises awareness of a particular kind of identity theft we're seeing right now. And then again, emphasis, engaging the ISO when you can. So in this sense, it was about if you're a faculty, staff member that's procuring software, purchasing software for university use, a lot of times nowadays it will include data going to third parties. So when you engage the ISO, we will do our effort to assess the risk and assess the data use and make sure that's compliant with various regulations, maybe that the contract's right in terms of what we wanted to assure for data. And then this last week, the week we're in right now, and part of what this webinar really connects with is being what we're phrasing, being a cyber champion. So the idea here, there is an article we released with the newsletter or news email that we posted. It's really about going through a couple of phases as an individual. Cybersecurity is all our responsibilities. It's up to us to do our own part in our own way to protect not only ourselves, but each other and the institution. So I essentially broke it up into 3 phases. You got the learning phase, which is what all the past weeks were about, what this webinar is about in many ways, and then ongoing from there, engaging, working with us, reading articles, doing whatever you can. Next phase would be participating. This is where you actually listen to our recommendations, you practice the things we are recommending. This could be, use of a password manager, use of passphrases, installing updates on your computer, doing those type of things. Advocating is the next phase after that, where you would take everything you learned, everything you do, and promote it with others, promote it with your areas, promote it with your family and friends. Cybersecurity covers just about every part of our life today, and there's no harm in spreading it further. So to continue kind of what this week is about and what this entire month's about, I've got a few topics I want to hit on from the learning aspect, raising awareness. Once I get through these, I've got a couple of personal recommendations for myself for all of you, and then we will have a point in time that you can ask questions, and I'll respond to them at that point if you've submitted them. So off the bat, just real quick for some insight. Email tends to be one of our biggest challenges these days for attacks. They're very effective against the higher ed community. They are also very low cost for threat actors to execute on. And it's very hard to prevent in terms of the technology and solutions, because the messages will look very similar to legitimate messages, and we don't want to block those. So just for some insight, you've probably seen the outcome of this, but anatomy of email attacks usually starts with an initial compromise. So this will come from an outside source and compromise an individual on campus. From there, you can see widespread emails. So this is sometimes seen where we get those part-time job offer kind of emails. Those are part of scams that somebody got compromised, and they're doing widespread emails within the community from that point. Now, they're doing that so they can collect more credentials, user accounts, passwords, whatever they can get out of it. That's their goal at that phase. Then they start doing reconnaissance, and this is where they're seeing who did they capture, who did they compromise, and how could they use it to further attack the institution or attack individuals. And then a variety of attacks, some of which I'll touch on and cover. So the attack insights I would like to give, continuing the learning phase here, 4 unique ones we've seen at ISU, or at least have a high concern of seeing at ISU. Impersonation, business email compromise, ransomware, unemployment fraud. I'll walk through each of these, highlight a point about each. First off, these have certainly started happening in the summer, a lot more than we've ever seen them before. They're targeting people in roles such as deans or higher level management units, or anyone that has a perceived sense of authority as far as the threat actors can see. They will take the simple approach of emailing people that actually work with them, colleagues, either report to them directly or might be in various groups. Sometimes they're referred to as boss scams because of that kind of hierarchical structure, but it can affect anyone. It could be where it's a professor's account being used to target students with the same kind of messaging and approach. It often has the correct display name, But there's a couple indicators to look for, and that's first the header warning, which in my image here you can see, and you've probably seen it plenty on the messages you get. That is a banner we add when a message comes from outside of our email system. So anytime that happens, it's at least a starting indicator that it's not a legitimate email. The second is the email address itself. So you can see the display name says Reggie Redbird. This is one I just put together to demonstrate this. And then you see the email address. So you might, depending on what email client you're using, whether it's on your computer, phone, or web, you will have to find out how can you see the actual email address. In this case, this scheme in particular, we've seen a lot where the username will exist in it, and then some form of ISU reference. So ILSTU here, sometimes they'll say Illinois State, other times they'll say illinoisstate.edu in that full message. It's trying to make it look legitimate, but you really need to consider whether or not that's the real person's email address. A lot of times, if you were to respond to this, engage with this person, it'll end up with them asking for your cell phone number and then eventually asking you to buy some gift cards to either help them with something because they're in a meeting or unavailable right now. Simply put, if you're getting asked by anyone to buy gift cards and you're not, you don't know them personally, or you're talking in person, or it just seems odd, they're asking for several gift cards of a considerable amount. That's an indicator that's fraud. The reason the threat actors use gift cards is they can convert that into digital currency that then they can get into paper currency. And so it's an effective way for them to stay anonymous. Next, it's called business email compromise, but it's not limited to business. It certainly affects really, if you have an organization and email account, so just like the university and any of our email accounts, it can be used for this. It often involves phishing to start to some degree, but then the events are orchestrated after that, and it can take some weeks to execute. So the way that we've seen this here is in a few occasions, individuals that were compromised had their emails scraped to look for invoices that existed in there. And then the threat actors use that to continue a conversation with other accounts using that invoice that they found and kind of impersonating another company or another person, trying to get a wire transfer done. So these are usually thought out and practiced attacks. They learn who is who within an institution and how they can exploit trust in those accounts. Now, we also saw cases recently of where accounts were used to target other companies, not even internal to the university, but used our accounts and the relationship we had with some companies to attack them with this method. Now, the term or phrase business email compromise, that's one that the FBI uses, and I just share a little bit of note from them and their website for reporting such if you happen to come across any of this outside of the university. But the type of attack is just where it ends up in this wire transfer, wired fraud. That's their goal. Ransomware, this one real quick. While we haven't seen it at ISU, it is a regular threat, regular risk we face. Something to be aware of. Many higher ed institutions, municipalities, other companies, they've all been targeted by this. And what happens is when you get attacked by ransomware, it encrypts your data, and then the threat actor tells you to pay or the data is lost. It usually starts with phishing. It can start with just regular viruses and malware. But the ones that we've seen and other institutions I've talked to start with phishing. More often than not now, not so much in the past, but now, these attacks are orchestrated by criminal gangs or criminal organizations. So it is well-funded, well trained and skilled, and highly capable. It would be not too surprising to see it happen to just about any company nowadays. Over the years, some newer advancements was they started corrupting backups. So if you kept backups, they found out ways to corrupt it so you couldn't just recover and tell them to go away. As well as this year in particular, they started threatening the release of data that they encrypted. So not only do they encrypt it, they steal that data. So the critical importance here is doing all the things about checking links, checking senders, not opening suspicious emails or email attachments, not going to suspicious websites, also engaging the ISO whenever possible. It used to take them a good considerable amount of time to execute a ransomware attack. The recent research has shown that they can pull this off within 48 hours, where they infect you, move within the environment, steal data, encrypt data, and then demand payment. Another one, this is very unique to Illinois and something we're seeing with university employees, but if you're just an employee in the university and maybe not at, or in Illinois, not at the university, this could affect you all the same. I just want to raise awareness of it. So what's happening is threat actors are exploiting the state system for requesting unemployment insurance. It had very, very weak identity validation or verification controls on it. And so massive amounts of fraudulent claims were filed against the system. It is impacting university employees and in a couple of different ways. Whenever that occurs, HR is supporting those affected. If you think this might have impacted you and you haven't heard from HR, contact them immediately. You also can look on our website for the identity theft article that we wrote. If this has happened to you or it does happen to you, it does indicate your identity has been exposed, which a couple of years ago, one of the major credit bureaus was compromised, Equifax, and just about every, at that time, every taxpayer in the United States, their social security number, their name, their birthday was exposed and breached. So it's not too hard to think if the controls for validation were weak and that data is out there, why the system struggled. So those were the 4 specific insights I want to take this opportunity to highlight. Now I'll cover the other last 2 phases of being a cyber champion, and then I got some recommendations for you. So this one, participating. So emphasis on the right, reviewing links and senders, updating, restarting devices. Sometimes an update doesn't apply until you restart, so you want to have a due diligence about that. Reports of suspicious activity. Sometimes they operate in ways we can't detect with our systems, and it is your report to us that gets us to investigate and find that something's happening. And then staying informed, connecting with us, attending webinars, asking for insight or review or consultation. Things like that are how you participate and do your part to be cyber aware and informed. On the left here, I did a little screenshot just to show how you can review the links in 2 ways. So one is hovering. If you're on a computer, you hover the link and it'll show it at the bottom or in a little pop-up. It may take a moment, just hover and look at what the link actually says. Here you can see it's a Google Docs form, very common method of trying to compromise or phish people. What you want to see there is either illstu.edu or illinoisstate.edu in that main part of the address. On the right side image, that's just when you do it on a mobile device, you have to touch and hold. You can't hover, obviously, unless you had a mouse connected. So you just push and hold and you get a little pop-up type of message like that. Last phase, advocate. So critical actions for users, recommendations. Share the article, share the experiences you have, even when they're bad. You know, if you're one of these individuals that was impacted by the identity fraud with unemployment insurance, share that with your coworkers, colleagues. If you got malware, share that. If you got phished and you realize after the fact, share that with your friends, family, classmates, whomever. That's how you advocate. You can request training from the office for your areas. This is certainly Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but we have to take an approach that is general. And so we can't dig into if there are specific threats or specific protections that apply to you in your area and the type of digital life you live. So request that training from us and that can be facilitated. Raise awareness of threats. So anything that I'm sharing here, you can freely share with people you know. Every single day we kind of face different newer ones, and it's hard to communicate in every possible way and engage with everyone. So that advocation for these things and raising awareness by everybody is critical. So some information resources before my recommendations. So the website that we're using to share not only news articles, but also where we might put our standards, policies, procedures is that docs.illinoisstate.edu/information security. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on that website as well. The email address there, so that's for the team. If you want to contact the team for setting up training, asking about you're going to purchase software and for the university and you want to review, or you just have some questions about information security or cyber security, you can email that. The last one again is if you have suspicious emails that you received and you want to make us aware, forward it there. Coming near the end of the brief webinar, and then extending past the hour will be question time if you want to stay around. There's also a series of polls that I'm going to start launching if you want to respond to them. I'll actually go ahead and do the first one now. So personal recommendations, real quick. I am making a disclaimer that these are recommendations from me individually, personally, not endorsed or supported in my official role or by the Information Security Office or by the university. I just want to take this opportunity to share with users services or technology that I would normally recommend on a personal and one-on-one level. So real quick, I'll run through these and then if there's questions, I can touch on them. So uBlock Origin. So there's ad blockers of all sorts, go by different names. This is my recommendation because it's an open source ad blocker, and open source community for tools like this are better because their code can be reviewed and validated as not being risk to you. There are ad blockers that do things that are not fully transparent to the user. It works in most browsers, and including some on mobile devices. This 1111, this is Cloudflare, runs a DNS service that is privacy focused. So when you have internet, your DNS is supported by your ISP. Technically, they know all the websites you request and go to. 1111 is not only an address that you can configure in your network and you can use for privacy, it has mobile apps that you can look up. Next, Have I Been Pawned? So that PWNED is like owned, but in the cyber community, it's just a phrasing that there is. This is a good website to search your email address or your passwords and see if they've ever been breached by one of social media services or different companies that have your data that you might not even know about. I would bet anyone that we do have a breach of some sort get returned when you enter your either ISU address or your personal email addresses. After you enter it, down at the bottom, they go into detail about what the breach was and what kind of data was leaked. KeyPass, so that's the password manager I use, just personal recommendation. It's open source. It's less friendly than some of the other popular ones. It's just free and available and does the job. Microsoft Authenticator, multi-factor authentication mobile app. As a little early notice, we are looking at multi-factor authentication for the university. It's one of the strongest mitigations for email attacks. You can get ahead of it with the Microsoft Authenticator app. It does more than just one service. You can use it for multiple services. And then these last three are just for users to get information. The Hacking Humans is a really good podcast. It talks about a lot of the phishing and social engineering attacks happening in the wild. It's also very entertaining. They'll have guests and sometimes take a user approach to describing what's happening rather than a security professional's approach. Krebs on Security is a very popular security researcher, has a lot of great articles on anything you could think of that I've talked about or referenced. He goes in depth and covers it. One of the biggest recommended articles I have from his site is one on freezing your credit with the credit bureaus as one of the only real protections against identity theft in that regard. And then Bleeping Computer is a good resource for news and forums on user technologies and viruses and breaches and such. It is often a place that will release something new before the regular news media sites have it in the cyberspace. So those, again, personal recommendations from myself, not in my role, not endorsed or supported by the university officially. So now, questions. We had a couple come in. I am going to switch to a second poll. You can feel free to stay on as I answer these, answer the polls, put in messages in the chat, and I'll respond. Otherwise, that was the content of the webinar, and I sincerely appreciate you for joining. As I said, being a cyber champion requires this learning and participating piece, so all of you have achieved that with this webinar. Now advocate and become a cyber champion. So now taking a look at the question. So the first question, what kind of training do students get? So on its face, there's not currently training that we are providing out of the Information Security Office, but we are working on it. Security training in general is something we need to improve and provide more in a year-round experience. Right now, we've focused and historically focused on the Cybersecurity Awareness Month and then some employee-specific training. There are some courses that cover it and touch on it, but my hope is to start endorsing and promoting what materials can be shared to students. Guidance can be given to students in classes, in their student groups, whatever possible way we can. If you have suggestions ever or thoughts about what training you want, again, this is back to the participate or advocate side of things. Ask for training. If you've got a group, an organization you want us to give a specific kind of training, that would certainly be a great opportunity to raise awareness. Taking a quick look at chat. So this is a interesting one. So trusting a program that has root access to devices, if it's been hacked before. So this is a good special call out to not. We would recommend not using jailbroken devices or running as local administrator on your computers and devices. The reason for that is in many circumstances when you run that, if you happen to go to a website that's been compromised or open an attachment that's compromised, it will run as that level privilege. So you really need to consider what you're running. Now, there are circumstances where, say you need to install software, it's going to have the capability to run at that level. From there, you've got to consider who developed the app, what are their privacy practices, what's their history with data protections. That's something that we can help with if you're particularly concerned or have a focus on it. Now, expanding on that same question, there's similar questions I'll get to in a moment. It seems like it's most likely referencing Proctor Track and questions around there. So I'll get to that in a second, just in case there's back and forth questions about it. So another question, do we need to resend emails to abuse or is it enough to report as phishing junk? So today, we need to have you forward those messages to abuse. There is capability that we're looking at with Microsoft that if you use the report as junk or phishing, it will inform us of that and make us aware of that. Right now, that's not available to us. So you should forward it to abuse. Now, if you happen to follow tech alerts and you see it posted there, then you don't need to report it at that point. We have awareness and we've published the details of that. Next question, do students currently get any training regarding privacy, tracking issues such as digital fingerprinting? Today, no. I will say so under the umbrella information security is cybersecurity, as well as a growing focus on privacy, data privacy. So in the traditional sense, information security doesn't give a critical position on privacy in the sense of true privacy, keeping your data private from others. It's more about compliance and regulation, which doesn't always consider what is truly private for yourself. It's controlled and regulated and managed. That's the traditional information security. So that training's not happening. This is where you might have your device or cookies in your browser or other information with the activity you do, where you connect to Wi-Fi, how you configure your device that allows you to be tracked and allows you to be kind of profiled in a sense. And that can be used strictly for advertisements and marketing, but other times it's used for malicious activity. So that's certainly something we want to focus on. I believe in the last year, I've seen more inquiry and concern out of all members of the university, all types, for privacy and data privacy. So I think we're going to focus and invest time in training, articles, guidance in that regard. Going back to my personal recommendations, this is where uBlock Origin would be one of my key recommendations, along with the Cloudflare 111, as it helps prevent others from capturing what you do on the internet. So a question about COVID-19's impact and the rise in cyber attacks targeting companies, universities. What has the ISU taken an approach to mitigating those cyber attacks? So overwhelmingly, we actually had a good posture for the shift from on-campus to remote. The one element that maybe didn't exist was some of our network protections, the firewalls we have on campus. They don't protect you when you leave campus with your device. But things like ensuring updates are applied, ensuring that our systems are mitigating known vulnerabilities, common vulnerabilities that are being exploited. We had a good practice and management of that. What I would say I intend to do from this webinar and from this awareness month is continue promoting awareness, continue offering training opportunities, because that starts as one of the most important mitigations to actual attacks we're seeing. We can keep things up to date all we want. We can reduce access all we want, but at some point, a regular user exploiting a vulnerability that gives them, ultimate control, it's going to compromise us to the same. So it's about preventing that exploitation. So now, question, how did the Information Security Office determine the use of ProctorCheck was secure and that our data is secure with the company? So this gets into what we reference as our data usage form process, or the risk assessment process for vendors. So in the case of ProctorCheck, as well as many other products that have been purchased this year that receive or utilize our data, we do a couple of things. One, we document the data that they actually collect and use, so we have a record of it. We evaluated that set of what we call data elements against regulation and compliance requirements to say, all right, if they're using this data, how does it need to be controlled, protected, managed? Then we did a couple of more traditional assessment of their practices, data practices, policy statements, contractual language. That's really just assuring that we own data, that we give them, that they practice the type of due diligence that we expect out of them. But because of the nature of ProctorCheck, we went a few steps further and assessed their actual compliance and certified compliance. And so we did require and receive their certifications of compliance with a couple of key data controls. So the compliance certifications referenced as a SOC 2 report. These are reports that you only can get by engaging external audit firms coming in and assessing your entire environment, including your personnel and hiring practices, how you prove that you secure data, how you back up and recover data, the companies you do business with. It gets very detailed. And they were certified as compliant with all the standard SOC requirements out of compliance. Beyond that, we did engage an assessment with another third party that looked at Verificient, the company that runs ProctorCheck, and also assessed their history of data breaches or history of public image on the internet. And the assessment was within the boundary of what just about any cloud-based company would show with that. So there weren't at the time specific issues or outliers to it. From there, they were compliant with the regulation that we require out of them, or the state or federal level require out of us as an institution. And they had all the boxes marked as good. So I do believe, and I've worked a little bit with the messaging around ProctorCheck and what we did with at least the internal administration of the campus. I believe there is an article prepped for a more generalized overview of what I just shared. So I think what I'll do is, in addition to posting this webinar, is I can share more details of that in a written form for anyone interested. Couple in the chat area following up with a question. So kind of trust in vendors, what engaging with them, what we should do, and how individuals can assess. So this one hits specifically on government issued IDs to third parties online, and how do we know if a program is safe, if it requires access to main devices and knowledge of surroundings. So again, I can read in this message as being ProctorTrack or proctoring software solutions. So trust is two-part. One is understanding, asking questions of what we do, and you can certainly ask for the reports we received. Some of them we can share without issues. Others would be more share it in a controlled manner. But you then have to assess on an individual level your own comfort and confidence in not only us, because we're saying that we did our due diligence, but the company itself. For example, ProctorTrack recently dealt with an event where their website and a couple other systems were compromised. Now, they engaged an outside security firm and validated that no personal information was lost, but that's the type of thing that you need to consider as an individual. From there, it's voicing the opinion and vocalizing it if you happen to have concerns of trust and getting it heard. Now, the emphasis I would make is this isn't just a concern to be applied to ProctorTrack. It should be applied to all vendor solutions or products that third parties get our data. That is certainly something that I pay critical attention to and try and do my best to highlight risks or concerns when they're made known. It's something that you just need to hold us accountable and challenge us to do our best to ensure your data is secure with who we partner with, and then know what you're using. I know ProctorTrack in particular, there was email. I oversaw that kind of explained the experience a little better for students. I think that was a communication issue at the start. So hopefully that's improving. If not, feel free to email information security office at ilstu.edu or my email directly. That's fine. I don't have issue with that. And we can expand on these type of things. So I do not see any new questions. I see the polls were filled out. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and actually share the results for the first one. So, and again, thank you all for joining, participating, asking the questions if you did. Anyone that registered and participated is entered into a prize raffle, and that information you'll be contacted directly once that's the raffle is completed. We'll also post on social media and the website about who won if they want to be known. Otherwise, that concludes everything that I have. Feel free again to reach out to me. Do your best to finish out this Cybersecurity Awareness Month, sharing what you've learned or sharing what you think is important with those around you and in the areas that you live a digital life. So have a good rest of your day. Thank you.